You know how people say there are moments in life you wish you could erase? Moments so haunting, so unexpected, that even years later, they cling to you like a shadow? I have one of those moments. And no matter how hard I try to bury it, it always finds a way back to me. Even now, when I close my eyes, I see it all. The dim glow of the hotel lamp flickering against the walls. The low hum of the air conditioning, filling the silence between us. The weight of his gaze on me from across the room, unblinking, unreadable, charged with something I wasn't ready to understand. And the worst part? I ignored the warning signs. I should have known something was off. I should have felt it creeping in long before that night. The way his eyes lingered a second too long. The way his words, seemingly harmless, carried something deeper. The way my own heart would race when it shouldn't have. But I brushed it off. I told myself I was overthinking. That I was imagining things. That I was just tired, lonely, caught up in my own emotions. Until that night. Until the moment I realized he wasn't just looking at me. He was seeing me. And in that second, in that impossible, fleeting moment, I didn't know who I was anymore. If you think you know how this story ends, trust me, you don't. This isn't just a story about infidelity. It's about temptation. About blurred lines. About a single moment that can change everything. And once you hear what happened, you won't forget it either. Before I tell you everything, do me a favor. Hit the like button if you've ever found yourself in a situation you never expected to be in. And if you've ever faced a moment of temptation, one that made you question everything, drop a comment below. I need to know I'm not alone in this. Because what happened that night in that hotel room was something I never saw coming. I guess I should start at the beginning. Before that night. Before the lines blurred, before the tension, before I found myself standing at the edge of something I never thought I'd have to resist. My name doesn't really matter. What matters is that I'm a woman in my late 30s. A wife. A stepmother. Someone who, for the last decade, has lived in the shadow of a marriage that looks perfect from the outside but feels empty on the inside. I wasn't always this woman. I used to be desired. Wanted. My husband and I used to have fire between us. We used to share more than just schedules, dinner tables, and polite conversations about bills and responsibilities. There was passion once. But over the years, life happened. Careers took priority. Kids needed attention. Somewhere along the way, I became invisible. My husband, he's a good man, at least in the ways that count on paper. Provides. Stays faithful. But love? Affection? The kind of attention that makes a woman feel like she's still beautiful, still seen? That faded long ago. And then, there's him. My stepson. He's in his mid-20s, still young, but old enough to carry himself with a confidence that catches people off guard. He's polite, well-mannered, respectful. But there's something about him that's hard to define. Something just beneath the surface, unreadable, calculated, observant. Our relationship has always been simple. Cordial. Not close, not distant, just there. We never had the kind of bond that made us confide in each other. I was just his father's wife. And he was just my husband's son. Until recently. Lately, I started noticing things I shouldn't. The way his eyes lingered a second too long when we talked. The way his voice softened when he spoke to me, gentler than necessary. The way his fingertips would brush mine when he handed me something small, insignificant touches that shouldn't have meant anything, but did. I shrugged it off at first. Told myself I was imagining it. That I was overanalyzing. But then came the family vacation. It was a last-minute trip. My husband, always working, wanted us to spend some quality time together. He booked a resort near the coast, promising we'd relax, reconnect. But when we arrived, there was a problem. The hotel had overbooked. And just like that, the arrangements changed. Instead of separate rooms, my husband and I were given one, and my stepson was supposed to have his own. But at the last moment, my husband got a call. A work emergency. One that couldn't wait. He had to leave. It was just for a night, he said. Maybe two. He'd come back as soon as he could. And since the hotel was full, they moved him to a different wing entirely, leaving me and my stepson to share a room. It was just one night. One night in a luxurious hotel suite, dimly lit, where the beds sat just a little too close together, where the air felt just a little too heavy, where something shifted in the space between us, something I should have never ignored. Because that night, when the door clicked shut behind us and we were left alone for the first time, I felt it. The change, the shift, the awareness. And for the first time, I wondered, had I really been imagining it all this time? Or had I been ignoring something that had been building long before this night? Something I wasn't sure I could stop. The door clicked shut behind us. And suddenly, it was just the two of us. I tried to act normal. Casual. Like it was nothing. Because that's what it was supposed to be, right? Just a room. Just two people. Just a set of circumstances that would be over by morning. But the air felt different. Thicker. Charged. I busied myself with small things, setting my bag down, checking my phone, looking for something, anything, to focus on. He, on the other hand, didn't seem the least bit unsettled. He moved easily through the space, setting his things down, stretching his arms, exhaling like this was nothing more than another ordinary night. And maybe it should have been. But then his phone buzzed. It was my husband. His father. I watched from across the room as he answered, his voice casual, calm. But as the conversation went on, something in his expression shifted. His brows furrowed slightly, his jaw tensed, and then I heard it, the disappointment in his voice. His father wasn't coming back tonight. Work had called him away, and now, instead of just a few hours, it would be a full night. Maybe more. He hung up, let out a breath, then looked at me. Just us tonight, then. There was no meaning in his words. At least, there shouldn't have been. But something in his tone made my stomach tighten, made my fingers curl into my palm. Guess so, I muttered, turning away. I reached for my suitcase, pulling out my sleepwear, simple, modest. A loose t-shirt and cotton shorts. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing that should have mattered. And yet, when I came back from the bathroom, I felt his eyes on me. Lingering. It was only for a second. A moment so fleeting I could have convinced myself I imagined it. But I didn't. I knew that look. I'd seen it before. Not from him. But from men. From strangers. From people who wanted something they shouldn't. And suddenly, I felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with what I was wearing. I shook it off, forcing a small, nervous laugh. Long day, huh? He smiled, nodding. Yeah, long day. I climbed into my bed, pulling the sheets over me, trying to push away the strange feeling creeping up my spine. For a while, we just laid there. Silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning, the occasional creak of the walls settling, the soft flicker of the bedside lamp casting shadows across the ceiling. Then he spoke. Are you happy? The question caught me off guard. What? I turned my head slightly, glancing at him across the small space between our beds. I mean, in your marriage. With my dad. Are you happy? I let out a breathy chuckle, shaking my head. That's an odd question. Is it? His voice was softer now. Calmer. I hesitated. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I wasn't sure I wanted to say it out loud. But in that moment, maybe it was the exhaustion. Or the loneliness. Or the fact that for the first time in a long time, someone was asking. So I told him the truth. I don't know, I admitted. Sometimes I feel invisible. Like I'm just part of the furniture. Something that's always there, but never really seen. A silence fell between us. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't forced. It was just heavy. Like the weight of my words had settled between us, pressing down on the space that separated our beds. Then he whispered something. Something I wasn't prepared to hear. I see you. I always have. My heart skipped a beat. Not because of the words themselves, but because of how he said them. The depth. The certainty. The quiet intensity behind them. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, my pulse uneven. I should have laughed it off. Should have brushed it aside, made a joke, turned over and pretended I didn't hear him. But I didn't. Instead, I just laid there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of his gaze still on me. And for the first time that night, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Not loneliness, not neglect, not emptiness, but something far more dangerous. Something I didn't want to name. I couldn't sleep. I tried. I turned over, shifted the pillow, adjusted the sheets, did everything I could to find comfort. But no matter how I positioned myself, my mind wouldn't let me rest. His words echoed in my head. I see you. I always have. It shouldn't have meant anything. It shouldn't have stuck with me. But it did. Because it's been so long since someone has said something like that to me. So long since I felt like I existed outside of my roles. Wife. Stepmother. A woman who fades into the background, who isn't noticed, who is just there. But he saw me. And worse, I liked it. That's what scared me the most. Not his words, not the way his voice lingered in the air, but the warmth that spread through my chest when he said it. The way my stomach clenched, the way my breath hitched just slightly, just enough for me to feel something. A feeling I hadn't had in a long time. I turned onto my side, squeezing my eyes shut, forcing myself to breathe evenly. I had to let it go. It was nothing, just an innocent comment. I was reading too much into it. But my mind wouldn't let it drop, because beneath the surface, there was truth. The truth I didn't want to admit. That I'd been neglected for years. That I'd learned how to live with it, how to ignore the ache of being unseen. That I had stopped expecting my husband to notice me. Stopped hoping. Stopped trying. But tonight, someone did notice me. And that thought alone sent a fresh wave of guilt crashing over me. This was my stepson. My husband's son. What kind of woman lets herself feel anything in a moment like this? This is ridiculous. I'm overthinking. He's just a boy, isn't he? I force my eyes open, staring at the ceiling. The dim glow from the bedside lamp cast shadows on the walls, stretching across the room like silent reminders of the distance I was supposed to keep. Then, a sound. The rustling of sheets. A slow, deliberate movement. I wasn't the only one awake. My breath caught in my throat. Was he looking at me? Was he lying there, thinking the same things I was? The silence between us was thick. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. Then, barely above a whisper, I heard it. A slow, steady inhale. A deep exhale. He was awake. He knew I was awake too. And yet, neither of us said a word. The clock on the nightstand ticked. A soft, rhythmic sound that only made the tension heavier. My mind was screaming at me to shut it down. To turn away. To erase this moment before it turned into something dangerous. But my body was frozen. Because deep down, I already knew. Something had shifted. And there was no turning back. I couldn't fight it anymore. The silence, the tension, the weight of what had been left unsaid, it pressed down on me, making it impossible to pretend I was asleep. So I turned over. Slowly, carefully, expecting to see him asleep, expecting to find some kind of reassurance that I had imagined it all. That this was all in my head. But he wasn't asleep. He was awake. And he was watching me. His eyes, dark and unreadable in the low glow of the lamp, locked onto mine the second I turned toward him. He didn't look away. Didn't pretend. He just stared. And for the first time, I didn't know what to do. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat was dry, my pulse uneven. He spoke first. A whisper, barely above the hum of the air. You deserve to be seen. My breath caught in my chest. You deserve to be wanted. Cherished. I felt the words settle over me, heavy and intoxicating, slipping through the cracks I didn't even realize I had. Because the truth? I had wanted to hear them. Needed to. But not from him. Not like this. I shook my head, forcing a quiet, unsteady laugh. Stop. It should have sounded firm. Commanding. Like I meant it. But my voice wavered. And he heard it. He felt it. The shift. The uncertainty. The hesitation that shouldn't have been there. The air between us grew thicker, charged with something I didn't want to name. I could feel it in the way he was looking at me. In the way his fingers twitched against the sheets as if resisting something. In the way his chest rose and fell, controlled but deliberate, like he was holding something back. I wanted to move. I should have moved. But I didn't. I stayed there, lying in the dim light, feeling every second stretch into something dangerous. Then, a small movement. His hand. Just barely. Just enough to make me question if it was an accident. But it wasn't. His fingers brushed against mine. A whisper of contact. A moment so brief it could have been nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Because I didn't pull away. I should have. I should have yanked my hand back, turned over, shut my eyes and ended this before it became something it shouldn't. But I didn't move. And neither did he. The silence between us stretched impossibly thin. A single breath, a single wrong move, and it would break. Tell me to stop. His voice was low, rougher now. Not a demand. Not a plea. A test. When I wasn't sure I was strong enough to pass. Because right now, I didn't want him to. His hand is still there. Fingers barely touching mine. I can feel the warmth of his skin against mine, just a whisper of contact, just enough to make my body betray me in ways my mind is screaming against. No, this is wrong. This is dangerous. But I don't move. And neither does he. Everything slows down. The air is thick, unbreathable. My heartbeat pounds so loudly in my ears I'm convinced he can hear it too. His eyes are locked onto mine, searching, waiting. Tell me to stop, he says again. I open my mouth, but the words won't come. Because some part of me, some deep, dark part one don't want to admit exists, doesn't want him to stop. And that terrifies me. My mind is at war with my body. My logic is screaming at me, telling me to move, to shut this down, to put distance between us before the line we've been dancing around completely shatters. But then a knock at the door. A sound so sharp, so sudden, that it crashes through the haze in my mind like a bucket of ice water. We snap apart. My hand yanks away. His breath hitches. Reality slams back into me so hard I feel sick. What the hell was I doing? The knock comes again, firmer this time. And then, it's me. Open up. My husband. My stomach drops. The blood drains from my face so fast my head spins. I sit up too quickly, heart racing, hands shaking. The heat that was in the air just seconds ago has vanished, replaced by a suffocating weight of panic, of guilt, of horrified realization. I almost did something I could never take back. I almost let something happen that would destroy everything. I can feel his eyes still on me. But I don't dare look at him. I can't. Instead, I push off the bed, moving too fast, too stiffly, my body caught between fight and flight. Just a second. I call out, my voice high, unnatural. I rush to the bathroom, shutting the door behind me before I can think, before I can even breathe. And then I see myself in the mirror. I don't recognize the woman staring back at me. Her face is flushed. Her lips are parted, breathless. Her eyes wide, full of something raw, something unspoken, something she doesn't want to admit she felt. I grip the edge of the sink, my chest rising and falling too fast. What was I thinking? What was I about to do? How did I let it get this far? But the worst part isn't the guilt. It's the regret. Because standing here now, shaking, breathless, my husband just outside the door, I can still feel the ghost of his touch on my hand. And I know. Nothing will ever be the same again. Outside, my husband waits. Oblivious. And in the room I just fled from, he is still there. I can't face either of them. Not yet. Not like this. I splash cold water on my face, but it doesn't wash away the fire still crawling under my skin, the ghost of that almost touch lingering like a scar burned into my memory. I squeeze my eyes shut. Try to push it down. Lock it away. It was a mistake. A moment of weakness. That's all. But the what-ifs are relentless. What if I hadn't stopped? What if he had kissed me? Did I even want him to stop? I force myself to take a deep breath and straighten up. I can't afford these thoughts. I can't afford to let them live inside me. I smooth my expression, open the door, and step back into reality. The sun is too bright. The morning light spills through the hotel window, sharp and unforgiving, illuminating every flaw, every unspoken sin hanging in the air. I sit at the small table in the room, my coffee untouched, my hands wrapped around the ceramic as if warmth will somehow soothe the storm inside me. Across from me, he sits. Too normal. Too calm. He eats his breakfast like nothing happened. Like last night never existed. I should be relieved. I should be grateful that he isn't acting strange, that he's not making this worse. But it unsettles me. How is he so unaffected? So composed? Does it mean nothing to him? Or does it mean too much? And then there's my husband. Sitting beside me, scrolling through his phone, completely unaware of the wreckage sitting just inches away from him. He leans over, presses a light, fleeting kiss to my cheek, murmuring a casual, "Good morning, babe." I freeze. For a moment, I can't move. Because his lips, the lips I vowed myself to, don't feel like his anymore. They feel foreign. They feel wrong. I swallow hard, forcing a small smile, nodding. But my stomach churns. Because my husband's touch feels distant. But my stepson's? I still feel that. My hands tighten around the coffee cup. My heartbeat is uneven, my skin hypersensitive. Every accidental brush of his arm against mine, every time our eyes meet across the table, it burns. I can't escape it. I can't escape him. And I don't know if I want to. The moment my husband leaves the room, I exhale a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I shouldn't feel relieved. I shouldn't feel this, untethered. I should be grateful for him. He is my husband. The man I vowed to love, to honor, to stay faithful to. And yet, why do I feel like a stranger in my own life? I glance toward the other side of the room where he still sits. He meets my eyes for just a second. A flicker of something unreadable passes between us. Something neither of us are willing to say out loud. Then, just as quickly, he looks away. And I hate that it hurts. Because it shouldn't. Because I am not this woman. I am not someone who entertains the idea of betrayal. I am not someone who lets her heart waver, who craves the attention of another man, especially not this man. But I did. I do. And I don't know how to live with that. I grip the edge of the table, staring at my reflection in the black surface of my untouched coffee. My hands tremble, my pulse unsteady. What does this say about me? Am I a terrible person? Do I even love my husband? I do. I know I do. But then, why did I want last night to go further? Why did my body betray me? Why, even now, does some dark, secret part of me long for something I have no right to want? I think about my marriage, and it terrifies me how much I needed that. The weight of unspoken desires, unfulfilled needs presses down on me like a crushing force. Because that's the real betrayal, isn't it? Not what happened. Not the almost touch, the whispered words in the dark. But the longing, the wanting, the fact that even if I didn't cross the line, I wanted to. And maybe that's worse. Maybe the most dangerous betrayals aren't the ones we act on. Maybe they're the ones we almost did. I still don't have the answers. I don't know what last night meant. I don't know what it says about me. All I know is that something inside me changed. Maybe it was always there, this quiet longing, this unspoken ache I had buried so deep that I almost forgot it existed. But now, I can't unfeel it. I can't erase the memory of his voice, of his touch, of how much I wanted it. And that terrifies me. Because where do you go from here? How do you look your husband in the eyes, knowing that part of you strayed, even if only in thought? How do you sit across from someone you almost let yourself fall for and pretend nothing happened? I don't have the answers. But maybe you do. Maybe you've been here before, caught in that fragile space between loyalty and desire, between what's right and what feels inevitable. So tell me, have you ever faced a moment that changed everything? What would you have done in my place? Would you have walked away before it was too late? Or would you have let the moment take you? And tell me, is emotional betrayal just as bad as physical infidelity? Because after last night, I'm not sure I know the difference anymore. If you've ever struggled with forbidden emotions, if you've ever stood at the edge of something dangerous and had to decide whether to pull back or fall, let me know in the comments. I need to know I'm not alone in this. And if you want more raw, real-life confessions, stories that take you into the deepest corners of human emotion, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because this story? It's far from over. Temptation isn't a storm. It isn't loud. It doesn't arrive in a sudden, violent crash. No, it's a whisper. A slow, creeping thing that sneaks in when you least expect it. It doesn't come with flashing lights and blaring sirens warning you to run. It comes in moments. In glances. In words that feel too good, too right, too necessary to ignore. It finds you in the spaces where you feel unseen. In the cracks where loneliness settles. In the parts of yourself you thought had been forgotten. And then, before you even realize it, you're already too close to the edge. That's what happened to me. I didn't go looking for this. I didn't wake up one day and decide to feel something I shouldn't. It just happened. It happened in the way he looked at me like I was someone again. It happened in the way his voice held something unspoken, something I hadn't heard in so long. It happened in the way my body reacted before my mind could stop it. And now? Now I have to live with it. I left that hotel room unchanged on the outside. My marriage was still intact. My life, from the outside, remained the same. But inside? Something was different. Something inside me had unraveled, shifted, awakened. And no matter how hard I try, I can never go back to who I was before that night.